I chose The Little Engine That Could. And I have to tell you, I got surprised. I'm going to share those surprises with you. I'm going to start by actually reading you the story, and I hope you will listen with more than nostalgia, because some of you probably even remember this book. Listen as adults, especially because there's going to be a quiz afterwards, and you'll want to do well on that. I'm reading the 1954 edition. In fact, this is the actual book I read from when I was a little girl. It has my sister Libby's name in the front in my mother's handwriting. So clearly she took it to school for show and tell, and Mom wanted to make sure it came home again. So we're going to read it, and Peter is going to be my page turner. And here we go. All right, retold by Watty Piper. Chug, 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 puff, 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 ding dong, ding dong, the little train rumbled over the tracks. She was a happy little train. Come on, Peter, you got to keep up with me, for she had such a jolly load to carry. Her cars were filled full of good things for boys and girls. There were toy animals, giraffes with long necks, teddy bears with almost no necks at all, and even a baby elephant. Then there were dolls, dolls with blue eyes and yellow curls, dolls with brown eyes and brown bobbed heads, and the funniest little toy clown you ever saw. There were cars full of toy engines, airplanes, tops, jackknives, picture puzzles, books, and every kind of thing boys or girls could want. But that was not all. Some of the cars were filled with all sorts of good things for boys and girls to eat. Big golden oranges, red-cheeked apples, bottles of creamy milk for their breakfasts, fresh spinach for their dinners, peppermint drops, and lollipops for after-meal treats. The little train was carrying all these wonderful things to the good little boys and girls on the other side of the mountain. She puffed along merrily. Then all of a sudden she stopped with a jerk. She simply could not go another inch. She tried and tried, but her wheels would not turn. What were all those good little boys and girls on the other side of the mountain going to do without the wonderful toys to play with and the good food to eat? Here comes a shiny new engine, said the funny little clown who jumped out of the train. Let us ask him to help us. So all the dolls and toys cried out together, Please, shiny new engine, won't you please pull our train over the mountain? Our engine is broken down and the boys and girls on the other side won't have any toys to play with or good food to eat unless you help us. But the shiny new engine snorted, I pull you? I am a passenger engine. I've just carried a fine big train over the mountain with more cars than you ever dreamed of. My train had sleeping cars with comfortable berths and a dining car where waiters bring whatever hungry people want to eat, and parlor cars in which people sit in soft armchairs and look out of big plate glass windows. I pull the likes of you? Indeed not. And off he steamed to the roundhouse where engines live when they are not busy. Oh, how sad the little train and all the dolls and toys felt. Then the little clown cried out, The passenger engine is not the only one in the world. Here's another engine coming, a great big strong one. Let us ask him to help us. The little toy clown waved his flag and the big strong engine came to a stop. Please, oh please, big engine, cried all the dolls and toys together. Won't you please pull our train over the mountain? Our engine is broken down and the good little boys and girls on the other side won't have any toys to play with or good food to eat unless you help us. But the big strong engine bellowed, I am a freight engine. I've just pulled a big train loaded with big machines over the mountain. These machines print books and newspapers for grown-ups to read. I am a very important engine indeed. I won't pull the likes of you. And the freight engine puffed off indignantly to the roundhouse. The little train and all the dolls and toys were very sad. Cheer up, cried the little toy clown. The freight engine is not the only one in the world. Here comes another. He looks very old and tired, but our train is so little, perhaps he can help us. So the little toy clown waved his flag and the dingy, rusty old engine stopped. please, kind engine, cried all the dolls and toys together. Won't you please pull our train over the mountain? Our engine has broken down and the boys and girls on the other side won't have any toys to play with or good food to eat unless you help us. But the rusty old engine sighed. I am so tired. I must rest my weary wheels. I cannot pull even so little a train as yours over the mountain. I cannot, I cannot, I cannot. And off he rumbled to the roundhouse, chugging, I cannot, I cannot, I cannot. Then indeed the little train was very, very sad, and the dolls and toys were ready to cry. But the little clown called out, here is another engine coming, a little blue engine, a very little one. Maybe she will help us. The very little engine came chug-chugging merrily along. When she saw the toy clown's flag, she stopped quickly. What is the matter, my friends? She asked kindly. Oh, little blue engine, cried the dolls and toys, will you pull us over the mountain? Our engine is broken down and the good boys and girls on the other side won't have any toys to play with or good food to eat unless you help us. Please, please help us, little blue engine. I'm not very big, said the little blue engine. They use me only for switching trains in the yard. I've never even been over the mountain. But we must get over the mountain before the children awake, said all the dolls and toys. The very little engine looked up and saw the tears in the doll's eyes, and she thought of the good little boys and girls on the other side of the mountain who would not have any toys or good food unless she helped. Then she said, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. And she hitched herself to the little train. She tugged and pulled and pulled and tugged, and slowly, slowly, slowly they started off. The toy clown jumped aboard and all the dolls and toy animals began to smile and cheer. Puff, puff, chug, chug went the little blue engine. I think I can, 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 I think I can. Up, up, up. Faster and faster and faster the little engine climbed until at last they reached the top of the mountain. Down in the valley lay the city. Hooray, hooray, cried the funny little clown and all the dolls and toys. The good little boys and girls in the city will be happy because you helped us, kind little blue engine. And the little blue engine smiled and seemed to say as she puffed steadily down the mountain, I thought I could, 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 I thought I could. I love this story. It's not hard to see the main lesson, is it? It's the power of positive intention, the faith so as to move mountains. And by now in your life, you know this to be a real phenomenon. When you set your intention, your I think I can, firmly and clearly, stuff happens. The universe moves, people show up to help you, synchronicities occur. And the opposite is also true. If you tell yourself you can't do something, like the rusty old engine did, it's virtually impossible to succeed. Henry Ford put it like this: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's about the energy of positive intention. This is mountain, get out of my way. And it's astonishing how well that works. This story has appeared over the years in many different forms. The earliest one on record was published in Sweden in 1902. It showed up in the New York Tribune in a 1906 sermon by the Reverend Charles Wing, who preached it on a Sunday while his wife was in the hospital in labor. And when he got done with the service, and got himself over to the hospital, he discovered that he had a baby son and that his wife had died. So he had to fill out the birth certificate and name the child. And he named that baby boy Injun That Could. Like 3 words. That's the kid's name, Injun That Could. Injun That Could lived to be 109, and he only died in 2015 in New Jersey. He was a naturalist and a journalist all his life. Kind of an amazing background. Okay, so now we're ready for the quiz. Here's the first quiz question. What parable of Jesus do you see reflected in this story? Terry.
The Good Samaritan.
Oh, yeah. Right?
Samaritan.
The big engines that ought to be able to do the job come by and refuse to help. And the least likely rescuer is the one who does the job. Do you know, I didn't make that connection until I just reread this story a few weeks ago, getting ready for this morning. As a child, I must have read this exact book. I can't tell you. And I read it to Betsy. And I missed that connection completely. Kevin?
I had to throw in that I actually thought of loaves and fishes instead of the Good Samaritan.
Okay.
With just the whole idea, just put it out there and it'll happen. Just believe and it'll happen. That was, so as soon as you said Good Samaritan, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. You know, everybody comes by and says, no, I can't do it. But the initial one that came to me was loaves and fishes.
Loaves and fishes, okay. Okay, so that was the warm-up question. That one was pretty
Holly?
Yes.
How about the one that says your faith has made you well?
Yeah. No, the Bible passage. Right. That story that's the absolute lesson of this one. Right. Yeah.
I have to be super nerdy and point out, Reverend Polly already knows this, of course, that we are in a church that does not follow the lectionary often, but should we be following the lectionary, we would actually be reading the parable of the Good Samaritan this Sunday.
So oh, really? That's a great coincidence. I love that. Okay, so that was the easy question. This one is a little trickier. Do train engines have a gender?
The other thing,
certain modes of transportation do, right? I mean, boats are always she, whether it's the Titanic or the family rowboat, right? And nobody questions that. But what about train engines? And do the train engines in this story that you just heard have a gender?
Yes.
We meet 5 train engines. There's the little red one that breaks down, the shiny new engine who pulls passenger trains, the big strong engine who pulls freight trains, the rusty old engine who's seen better days, and the little blue engine who stays in the yard and has never been over the mountain. I was shocked when I realized that the red engine that breaks down and the little blue engine that's never been over the mountain are both she. Mm-hmm. And the engines that do real work, or used to, are all he. Welcome to the 1950s.
Yeah.
Do you know, I never noticed that before, that the genders are different depending on the characters.
I didn't either.
This is how it happens, though. The cultural biases are built into everything around us, and we repeat them unconsciously because we're simply not aware. But the iteration just solidifies the bias.
So does that story actually refer to them as he and she?
You bet. You go back and look at those slides. I checked every single one. You bet. They sure do.
And also the colors.
And we went right over it, didn't we? Yeah.
Well, I realized when the blue engine was a she, and I thought, did they mention the other gender of the other train?
Yeah, right.
And I thought, oh, right, this female train comes to save the day.
There are a number of good lessons we can draw out of this, but one that occurred to me was to tie it to when I discovered how much language really matters. When Betsy and I arrived at College Heights in the late 90s, you guys were already using inclusive language, so that God was no longer he in all the prayers and all the hymns and all the whatever. And it made for some kind of tortuous constructions, you know, God said to God's self and that sort of thing. And I remember thinking to myself the first time I heard Berklow talking that way, it's like, wow, that's a lot of effort. You know, for what exactly? And I was shocked, speaking of being shocked, as I got into doing more with religion, especially when I got to seminary, I was shocked to realize that a whole lifetime of referring to God as he had kept me stuck with a very anthropomorphic image of God. God was still the Sistine Chapel version, the old man with the white beard who lives in the sky.
Mhm.
My head wasn't there, but what came out of my mouth just perpetuated that image, right? And if I wanted to move on in my own spiritual development and be able to think about God as something other than a supernatural being, I needed to talk about God differently, because all I did when I repeated the he's was I was conditioning myself. I was doing it to myself because language matters. So that now when I go visit a church that hasn't made that leap, and all through the whole liturgy God is he, I just kind of want to go, ugh, really? Because there's so many other wonderful ways to think about God, and all of them are metaphors for something we don't completely understand anyway. So, you know, God as a force field, God as source of light, God as that which is larger than me. They are all non-anthropomorphic, and that's what I needed anyway in my own development. So if you're still working with God as he and that works for you, that's fine. But I mean, it was such an obvious connection for me, and why it was important for me to let go of that language, and why you won't hear me using it in church unless sometimes it shows up in, you know, poetry or music, and you sort of accept it in the moment. But most of the time, God can be whatever image works for you. So yes, somebody has a hand up. Aaron.
Yeah. I agree with you as far as the male-female thing, but I also think of it became interesting to me. I've used ever since Ishwaran and meditation and stuff. I've used Rama for and I for a long time I thought of that as, you know, he talks about an embodiment of joy and stuff, but of course, you know, it's Hindu, and I always felt a little strange because I thought, you know, I'm being disrespectful, or I'm being, you know, sort of against Christianity. And so only within maybe a few years ago, I suddenly sort of thought of that as, good heavens, you know, God doesn't have a denomination or a religion.
God doesn't belong to anybody.
Right. So now I think of Rama, I think of that as another word for God. And I think of it, you know, beyond just male, female, let's think beyond Christianity to a more universal idea of God. And so, you know, you can call it whatever you want, but somehow for me, God has a Christian sound to it. And I'd like to go beyond the Christianity to a more universal.
Yep. Karen? Karen, did you have a, or is that,
Well, I was just thinking about inclusion because one of the things that struck me right away, of course, is how white our literature of the 50s and 60s was.
mhm,
And one of the reasons we changed our language about God as much as we haven't like to, is to see ourselves reflected. You know, we believe through Genesis that we're created in God's image or with elements of God's life force in us. And I noticed right away the description of the two little dolls. There were blonde dolls with blue eyes, and there were, you know, brunette
mhm.
dolls with brown eyes. But of course, they were all quite white. It's so important for kids. I've seen it in my English as second language classroom when they find books that they believe reflect themselves, their culture, or their physiognomy. It just
It makes a
draws.
difference. It makes a difference.
And we still have a problem with underrepresentation in children's literature of Asian, African American faces, Native American stories that are genuine and so forth. So I just wanted to call people's attention to that. And when I give books, I look carefully for ones that are multicultural or reflect something about kids that's more inclusionary.
Yeah.
And I also thought of Noah's Ark. The toys look awfully paired up for a while. So,
Well, just to conclude, I'm grateful for this story because of the glimpse it gives me of my own past. And to stand here now and say, look how far we've come in our lifetimes. It's a big step forward to recognize the systems that we have been part of without realizing it, the systems we've been perpetuating unconsciously, whether it's patriarchy and gender bias, or white supremacy and racial bias, or normalization of heterosexuality. It goes on and on. You can't change a system if you can't see it. So the seeing is huge. And we've had to do a lot of seeing in our lifetimes, and there's more coming, I'm sure. Every one of these problem areas has seemed at first like a mountain that was too tall to climb. We can't possibly change these unconscious things that we've been part of. It's too big. It's always been like that, and other excuses. But mountains can be climbed, and systems can change, and progress can be made. And sometimes it feels like we're going backwards. And certainly the Supreme Court lately has helped that feeling. But when you climb a mountain, sometimes you do slide backwards a little bit, and then you get up and you climb back up again. And you just keep climbing, right? And you sing that song. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say, move, mountain. Mountain, get out of my way. That's my comment on the Supreme Court this week. Mountain, get out of my way. Okay, now let's talk back.